to this episode of Equalizer. My name is William Acosta. Today we have the distinct honor of hosting a truly courageous guest, Mr. Greg Dillon. With a distinguished career spanning more than 30 years in law enforcement, including roles as a police officer, FBI special agent, and supervisory inspector for the Connecticut Division of Criminal Justice, Greg Dillon exemplifies integrity and perseverance in public service. He's a renowned not only for his investigative expertise, but also for his unwavering commitment to the truth, having exposed systematic misconduct within the FBI and Connecticut law enforcement. His experience and insights offer a rare first-hand perspective of the challenges of whistleblowing and the pursuit for justice in America. Greg Dillon graduated first in his class from the police academy and began his career with the Branford Police Department before joining the FBI as a special agent in 1985. After serving in Alexandria, Virginia and Washington, D.C., he returned to Connecticut, holding numerous investigative and supervisory positions in the office of the Chief State Attorney. Dillon's professional accolades include numerous commendation awards across local, state, and federal level. As an author, he has published the acclaimed memoir, the book title, The Thin Blue Lie, An Honest Cop versus the FBI, published by Bombardier Books. This gripping account details Dillon's discovery of FBI agents falsifying affidavits in Connecticut, his courageous reporting of misconduct and harsh retaliation he endured, and his ultimate legal victory defending his right and principles. And welcome, Dillon. Thank you for being with us and with my audience. It's going to be a really interesting program. Thank you for taking your time. It is a very important program, something that is dear to my heart, something that I went through myself and many other whistleblowers or people that are seeking the truth from organizations that sometimes could be very harsh on what they call us idealists or seekers of the truth. What inspired you to first join law enforcement?
William, that's a great question because no one in my family was in law enforcement, but from an early age, I mean, as far back as grammar school, I had decided that I wanted a career in law enforcement and ideally as a FBI agent.
What was the first department that you joined when you started in law enforcement?
So technically, when I was in college, there was a branch called the Special Deputy Sheriffs that are now called Judicial Marshals. They were responsible for courtroom security and transportation of prisoners. And I was able to secure a position there where I would work 2 days a week and go to class 3 days a week. And then during the summer when I was on break, I would try to work 5 days a week. And that was my initial exposure, not technically to law enforcement, but at least to the court system and to criminal justice. So that was sort of my stepping stone entry until I graduated from college, and then I applied for a police department in Connecticut.
And what department was that when you first started your career in law enforcement?
That was the town of Branford. It was a nice shoreline community in Connecticut.
And how long were you there for?
I was there approximately 3 years part-time and 4 years full-time. When I was full-time, that's when I began my application process to the FBI.
And the application process takes from 1 to 2 years for it to resolve. What was your initial impression of the FBI when you get into Quantico and you know that you have been chosen and that you're going to start training?
So initially, William, I was in awe and maybe a little bit even intimidated by some of my colleagues. But then I began to realize some candidates were way more qualified than average, and some were less qualified than I expected. So, for example, there was a gentleman that was in the had been a Army Ranger. He had his pilot's license, very squared away, and then I had a roommate that was from Florida, and his background was he had been a part-time high school football coach and taught driver's ed. And I was thinking to myself, wow, I didn't think with that sort of background you'd even get your foot in the door. So there was a wide range, I guess, of candidates in my class.
How did you work in Alexandria, Virginia, and then in the Washington area, differ from your work in Connecticut?
Yeah, so my first assignment from Quantico was to the Alexandria field office in Northern Virginia. Almost everyone in my class was sent to a smaller sized office. Alexandria had about 60 agents in the office, probably another 60 support personnel. So it was considered a relatively small office, but in a very busy area, being so close to Washington, D.C., as you can imagine. While I was assigned there, a decision was made at headquarters to consolidate the Washington field office, which is the second largest office in the country. And we were basically absorbed by the Washington field office. So I went from a 60 agent office on one week into a 600 agent office the following week.
And that office is known for being a very political office because you're right there, almost in headquarters.
Sure.
And you have to please a lot of masters.
Yes. Yes.
How do you navigate as a young agent in these circumstances when you're like the lowest man in the poll, to be able to stay afloat without causing too much waves?
Yes. I had the good fortune of being on a violent crime squad, and because of that, I didn't detect a lot of interference from headquarters, even though they were only a very short drive away. And the understanding is the closer you physically are to headquarters geographically, the more interference you tend to get from them because they're more aware of what you are doing because they share the same physical space. We read the same newspapers, watch the same news. So they're constantly aware of what our activity is. But because of the fact that I was on a violent crime squad and the SWAT team, I didn't really detect any actual interference. But I will tell you something I thought was funny. On occasion, we would investigate bank robberies as part of our category. And if somebody from headquarters, if one of the supervisors at headquarters' wife worked for that particular bank, the next thing you'd get is a phone call inquiring, like, are you making any progress on that particular bank robbery? And it was only because, they were in the same general area and, one of their spouses or one of their children happened to work at the same bank. You would never see that if you were in a field office that was some distance away from headquarters, but that's about the only time I really picked up on on that type of nonsense.
How did you first uncover or your suspicion pattern grew regarding these affidavits that caught your eye as now a seasoned agent with a couple of years already under your belt to say there is a pattern of practice of misconduct going on that is going to affect the people of this country, meaning you took an oath, to uphold the Constitution and to protect the citizens that you're serving. What made you take that step, and who did you first inform that this was going on?
So just to take a step backwards, this actually took place after I left my service with the FBI. After 5 years of being an agent, I realized that now I could not get back to New England, which is what I was led to believe would happen within 5 to 7 years. I was told it would be another 10 or 15 years before I'd be eligible to transfer back to the New England area. So I resigned to accept a position with the Office of the Chief State's Attorney in Connecticut, where my home state. And after I began employment as an inspector with the Office of the Chief State's Attorney, I found myself assigned to an FBI fugitive task force out of the New Haven office. That is when I end up discovering inadvertently that agents were falsifying federal arrest warrants in an effort to get a federal fugitive warrant, so they could claim the statistic of getting a UFAP warrant and getting credit for it, and hopefully getting a financial incentive award for that.
And the type of manipulation or falsification of these warrants, what wording did they use that caught your eye as a trained federal agent in the past and now as an inspector in the Attorney General's office?
William, it turned out it was blatant falsification of an affidavit. To explain, on the task force, everyone had their own caseload of fugitive cases. You work those cases exclusively. Now, you may do some of the work with a partner or with a team, but ultimately you were the lead investigator and it was your file. I would prepare an affidavit if I thought there was a probable cause that a fugitive had left the state, and then an FBI agent, and usually it was a first office agent, a younger agent, would then take that draft and write up their version of it, submit it to the federal judge for review, and hope to get it signed as a federal warrant, so they would get the credit for a UFAP, an unlawful flight to avoid prosecution warrant. When I turned over the warrant, I knew exactly what was on the affidavit as I had prepared it. By accident, I happened to review a warrant that came back signed from a federal judge, and I recognized that an entire paragraph of new information had been added to the body of the warrant. And I recognized immediately that the information was false. Number one, because I was the only one working the case, and number two, because the information was attributed directly to me.
Was anyone else aware of this misconduct before you spoke out?
Well, I would have to say yes, because the coordinator of the task force, who was an FBI agent, an experienced FBI agent, several times the federal warrants would be returned for lack of sufficient probable cause. The judge would not re-sign it. And on 2 occasions, he announced that he would rewrite the warrant in such a way that the judge would have to sign it, because his motto was, if you don't have it, lie. That was the red flag that made me cautious about what was going to take place in the office with the affidavits. That's when I began to make it a point to review the signed arrest warrants. And that's when I realized there was a pattern of falsifying federal warrants.
Were the specific cases that exemplify the FBI misconduct?
So on my website, for anyone who is interested in actually reading the actual warrants themselves, it is the thinblueliebook.com. And on the website, you can actually read PDF copies of the true warrant, which I had prepared, and then the falsified warrant, which the FBI agent had prepared.
Yeah,
and
I was able to read all of them.
Okay.
For preparing for this interview, and I found it amazing because you put those as Exhibit 1.
Yes.
In one of your cases, you had two cases, two separate
lawsuits. Yes.
Lawsuits, and it was amazing the way that you documented and also analyzed to give the viewer or give the jury or the judge,
yes,
which case you handled it, whether it was as a jury trial or you asked for a judge to be the only one making the decision. and it was well done. I mean, I have worked in criminal defense since 1999, and over the years, I've handled a lot of cases, also whistleblowers in different agencies. Never had to do one with an FBI whistleblower, even though I met other whistleblowers in the FBI before. And you are really sharp, and I take my hat off to you, and I commend you for taking a step. What do you feel today with the weaponization of the justice system, and in specific the FBI before President Trump came into office?
Yeah, I mean, I still stay in touch with a number of agents, most of them retired at this point. The impression that I get from talking with them and emailing them, very disappointed in the appearance that the FBI had been politicized. And of course, how do you prove that? Well, we'll see. If Mr. Patel and Mr. Bongino and Pam Bondi are able to present a solid case to convince a judge or jury that there's been misconduct, politically influenced misconduct. But our impression, when I say our impression, retired FBI agents, it seems to be that the FBI became a political arm of the Department of Justice and the Attorney General Garland, and we're hoping now that with this new administration in place, that will be corrected.
What was your fear? What fears did you have before reporting the misconduct? There's always like a pause that you take as a whistleblower. Who do I go to? Who can I trust? And am I going to get burned? Or is the cat going to be let out of the bag?
Yes. Yeah.
If I come forward? How do you navigate that?
Cautiously. What I had the benefit of staying in touch with the applicant coordinator that had recruited me through the application process as a new agent. I stayed in touch with him during my career as an FBI agent. I'm still in touch with him today. We're friends. But I had contacted him shortly after I made this discovery, and I wanted his input and his opinion as to what I should do, because I recognized the jeopardy I was in by making such a serious allegation of misconduct. And he put it back on me, and basically after listening to my story said, "Greg, you know what you need to do." He said, "But the only thing is be careful." He says, "When you run with wolves, you cannot trip."
Right.
So
what reaction did you get from the chief state attorney once he found out that you were trying to report this misconduct?
Initially, William, he responded appropriately. He was upset. He was angry. He was outraged that the FBI would engage in this type of conduct and put, me and my other inspectors in a very awkward position of having to bring this to his attention. What I did not realize was he was hoping at the same time to be appointed to a position in the Department of Justice under Janet Reno, and thought that he had a chance of leaving his position to go to Washington, D.C. and work for Attorney General Janet Reno. I'm afraid it influenced his decision-making, and instead of supporting us and backing us, he turned around shortly afterwards and began to defend the FBI and try to minimize what had taken place, explaining to reporters that discovered what had happened that this was nothing but a miscommunication, typographical errors, and personal animus or personality conflicts. He knew that was not the case. He had the evidence in his lap that the jury ended up with, the Exhibit 1 that you referred to. So he knew very well that we were all telling the truth and that the falsified warrants existed. But he decided to turn his back on us and side with the FBI knowing that the FBI would do his background investigation if he hoped to get a position with the Department of Justice.
Did OPR get involved, or your internal affairs? Well, you weren't in the FBI anymore.
Yes.
But OPR of the FBI got involved in this. How was it navigating with them? And were they there more to protect the image of the FBI, or were they there to protect you as a whistleblower?
Well, the first telltale sign that this wasn't going to be handled fairly was the fact that it took them half of a year to eventually contact us about our complaint. There's no way that should have gone 6 months without being addressed earlier. It was far too important to let it just sit there for 6 months unaddressed. They eventually flew 2 supervisors up from headquarters, OPR investigators. One of them actually recognized me from my work when I was in the Alexandria office, which I thought was a good thing, because he would, know that I had been a hard worker and an honest agent. But it became apparent very quickly that they were going to try to tamp this down and minimize what had taken place. Their questioning indicated to me right away that they just wanted this to go away and get their hands off it as quickly as possible. And the reason I could tell that, William, was because they tried to impress on me how serious my allegations were, and was I comfortable with the idea that people could lose their jobs or possibly even go to prison. And of course, my response was, that's not my job to make that decision as to what the discipline is or whether to prosecute the case criminally. I am doing my job in reporting the misconduct that I've witnessed. They offered me the opportunity to give a sworn statement under oath, and I agreed to do it. And then they offered for me to take a polygraph exam by an FBI polygraph examiner, and I agreed to do that also. And the proof that they didn't want to pursue this was they never took a statement from me, and they never offered me the actual polygraph exam.
You know what is funny about these polygraphs that people continue to mention, and it's used by a lot of federal agencies to prove or disprove whether you're being deceitful or not. They're not legal. I mean, they're not even accepted by the courts. They entertain them and they say, yeah, especially if you have somebody accused of a crime and he's trying to prove that he didn't do it, and they take it as a grain of salt. But when they use it with whistleblowers, they try to weaponize that.
Sure.
If you come up a little bit off the chart, then they'll charge you with lying to a federal agent.
But William, interestingly enough, if you are an FBI agent and OPR offers you a polygraph exam, you do not have to take it. However, they can use your refusal to take it in the disciplinary process as proof of a lack of truthfulness. So it was important, and ironically, they offered it to me. I don't know if they offered it to the FBI agents, but when I reviewed the OPR investigation, it was clear to me that they never polygraphed them or offered them a polygraph.
Right, because they didn't want to find out that you were telling the truth.
Exactly, 100%.
How did the harassment manifest at work and at home? And I want to explain to a lot of the viewers that when you become a whistleblower or when you report misconduct in any law enforcement agency or intelligence agency in the United States, they mark you with an X, and everything is done through phone calls. You could walk into a room and people will say hi to you, and you turn your back and everybody destroys you. The friends that you thought you had stop talking to you. If you ask for a promotion or you want to move to a different office, they will turn you down, and more or less you become a pariah, or what we call in law enforcement a rat. Is
Yes.
that the case? Is that what you felt?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, I interestingly enough that you bring that up, all of those examples that you cited, I experienced firsthand. Of course, The FBI agents went out and were telling everybody in the law enforcement community that they were in contact with that we were removed from the task force because we were incompetent, we weren't pulling our weight, we weren't catching people. It could not be further from the truth. Me and the 5 inspectors that were assigned there were only made up a third of the task force, but we were responsible for more than half of the arrests that were being made by the office. I received phone calls at my house, and I received a call on my voicemail at work calling me an effing rat, amongst other things. And I made a recording of the call. And eventually, the judge heard it. The jury did not hear it, but the judge heard it. And it convinced her that there was an element of violence involved in my case.
Did anyone warn you about possible repercussions? Did any of your friends say, listen, lay a little bit low, stop making so many waves? Did anybody try to convince you to, play safe?
Well, at this point, William, you can't unring the bell, as they say, right? Once I made and I knew this would happen, and I compare it to going down a road, and at the end of the road, you either go left or you go right. There's no straight anymore. You're either going to take a hard left or a hard right. And when you make that type of an allegation of criminal misconduct by a fellow police officer, that is the T intersection in the road. You either go along with it or you challenge it. And I knew once I challenged it, there was no turning back. So even though people would say to me, I don't think, I think your career is going to be impacted by this. I don't think this was a smart move. I think you're going to, regret this later. I had no real response to it because number one, I had committed to it. And number two, I didn't really feel I ever had an option.
Did your professional relationships change after they knew you were the whistleblower? Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. In fact, it followed me for so many years that I eventually ended up filing a second lawsuit some 5 years after the first one because the retaliation never really ended. It subsided and then it started up again after some time had gone by.
And they have long memories in law enforcement in this country, and they are very vindictive, meaning that they will hurt you financially, they will hurt you emotionally. And most of us as whistleblowers, we all suffer from PTSD. I have not met one whistleblower in all of the interviews I have conducted over the years that doesn't still carry some of the psychological scars from battling these people.
Yes. I remember when I was first starting to write the book several years after I retired, that I had to stop writing like after, say, 6 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night, because it was emotional to relive what I had gone through, especially, before the trial and during the trial. And it disrupted my sleep. I was not sleeping well at night because I was going to bed upset and my mind was racing and it just wasn't healthy. So I learned that I had to confine my writing to the daylight hours. And as soon as it started to get dark, to put it aside and save it for the following day because it just wasn't healthy.
You had some great people helping you.
I did.
One of them being Frank Serpico, another one being Mr. Lee, the criminologist. Henry Lee is his name.
Yep. Yeah.
He used to work in Connecticut. I don't know if he still does a lot of work in Connecticut.
Yeah, he's pretty much retired, but he's very active at the University of New Haven, where I first met him when I was going to college. And by coincidence, I believe he still lives in Branford, where I had been a police officer originally. Yes.
and then you had a great legal team, a good attorney. Who else was there for you? Was there any organization or any of the line organizations that helped you, or they all turned their backs on you? Because that was my that happened to me. They, you pay the dues into the unions.
Yes.
And they rather defend a criminal police officer.
Yes.
They do a whistleblower.
Correct. And it's funny, William, that you would even mention that, because my union was silent as far as the treatment that we were receiving. And the treatment was violated the union contract, a number of times. They never took any action. And it turns out the union president was friendly with the chief state's attorney and the administration. And shortly after my lawsuit, the union president was promoted to a supervisory inspector and then a chief inspector. So they took good care of that gentleman, because he sat on his hands while we were in the hot seat. And then within a short amount of time, all of a sudden he jumped 2 ranks and became a chief inspector.
How did your role and duties change after your decision to become a whistleblower?
Well, immediately, or I should say very soon after I called it to the attention of the chief state's attorney, he turned around and said that the Division of Criminal Justice had run out of funding for my fugitive squad. Now, I knew, William, that was not the case, because I had been involved in the budget process, and I knew that we were fully funded through the rest of the year and the following fiscal year. And out of nowhere, he announced that we had run out of funding. So he was disbanding the fugitive squad. He sent every inspector to a different courthouse in the state, and he sent me to the furthest location possible up in Litchfield, Connecticut. Beautiful part of the state, but it's cow country. The nickname for it is Siberia. And it's because you get up there and there's nothing to do. So now I was no longer a supervisor, and I had to drive an hour and a half each way to get to an office and sit there to read a newspaper.
What does the thin blue line mean to you personally?
Well, it was the thin blue lie on my title, and I used that purposely as a play on the thin blue line. So the thin blue line, as you well know, is that sort of that brotherhood that bands together to defend civilians from criminals. I took the opportunity to play with the word and change it to the thin blue lie, because the basis of my lawsuit was the lies that were in the falsified affidavits.
It happened to me when I used to see the NYPD cars. They had an acronym stating CPR, courtesy, professionalism, and respect. And to me, it was corruption, perjury, and retaliation. For a long time, I viewed, and I'm talking about the 1%ers. And I want the viewers to know, I love law enforcement. Doesn't matter what agency, and I will do anything for a brother and sister that needs help in the street. 24 hours a day, my phone is open to them, including a lot of whistleblowers that call me on a regular basis, at least to talk or to give them some type of help. Mm-hmm. In the New York City Police Department, while I was going through the academy, we had a thing called Test the Line. And the Test the Line was drilled into us. Your job is to go home to your families. Mm-hmm. Your brothers in uniform says it happened that way. You go with it. You don't make no waves, and you sign whatever needs to be signed. And it's us against them. That's the mentality in law enforcement. And over the years, I saw that instead of things getting better, law enforcement today plays a lot with the statistics. It's a big game for chiefs or bosses in civilian law enforcement that gets them promoted or gives them a better assignment.
Yes.
And career progression. But the career progression in the latter is that they step in on top of everybody to come out on top. Not who they hurt. It doesn't matter if the community gets hurt. And it's almost like a competition. Do you view it that way, or is it only my perception?
No, I think the body cameras, I think, have really impacted on that issue of test the line. But when it comes to statistics, there's really no corroboration, I guess. So they can do whatever they want to do to manipulate the numbers to reflect favorably on them. So I think that's probably still a very big issue. Interestingly, when I was on that fugitive task force, any case that we had opened, the task force coordinator would claim credit if that person was arrested, whether we had anything to do with it or not. And I knew that was deceiving, and it was deceptive, and it was dishonest. So, for example, William, if you had a case for someone and you were looking for them and they got arrested the night before on a traffic stop, the coordinator would claim that as one of our arrests. Really, we had nothing to do with it. The person just happened to get picked up, by chance. When I ran my fugitive squad, we would only claim credit for the arrests that we were involved in, and the rest were carried as cleared, but in a separate category. So we knew we had this many cases that were open and pending, this many were cleared, and this many were cleared by our involvement in the arrest process. That's the honest way of running numbers. Unfortunately, everyone's not honest.
What steps could agencies take to prevent similar abuses as the one that you had to endure?
And that's a great question, because we're a closed community. It's one of the few organizations that police themselves, which I think is a huge problem. There is no audit. There's no independent review. Any reviews or any audits are conducted in-house. So there's no really a foolproof way of verifying that everything is being done accurately and honestly. So I don't know what the solution is to that, other than the fact that there has to be penalties and punishment if anyone is caught falsifying records or changing numbers.
And all of this falsification of these affidavits, did it damage any criminal prosecutions? Or did defense attorneys, seeing your case, they started saying, I want the Rodriguez file, I want everything that's on it?
No, I'm sorry.
Continue.
Yeah, no, it actually did not, because of the fact that when I would bring, me or someone in the task force would bring a case in, the person was already wanted on outstanding warrant charges, all outstanding felonies, usually violent crimes. So they were a wanted person at that point. The problem became the FBI wanted to try to make every case a federal case by claiming the person had fled the state of Connecticut to avoid being arrested. That wasn't always the case. So the original outstanding charges were valid, and extradition had been approved by the state's attorneys. The problem became that the FBI wanted to now make them federal cases, and in doing so, falsified the affidavit to say that they had proof the person had left the state, when in fact, it wasn't a strong case the person had left the state, but they put information in there to deceive a prosecutor and a judge that the person was out of state.
Right. And once, let's say, some of those cases did make it into federal court with that falsification of those affidavits. I will, if I was the criminal defense investigator on the case, I will ask the defense attorney, let's request this, and that, whether it's through FOIL or whether it's through the discovery process, but we have to pinpoint exactly what information we want, and it could make the waters a little bit dark.
In William, that would never have happened, and it still would not happen, for the sole reason that anytime an arrest was made, the U.S. Attorney's Office would immediately drop the federal charges. So they were never going to risk that chance, because now there were no federal charges pending, only the state charges, which were valid.
But now, let me play devil's advocate.
Sure.
If a federal agent is willing to risk his career and lie on an affidavit and give it to a federal judge to sign it, right? How trustworthy can that individual be in law enforcement?
Not trustworthy at all. But interestingly, William, that you bring it up, the agents were clever enough not to say the information came from them. They would always say, the inspector has provided me this information, which I'm relaying to the court. So they try to put us as middlemen and claim that we were the sources of the false information, when in fact we weren't.
Right, and those inspectors gave you guys statements saying, we didn't say that, we never put those words in it, so it fell back into the agent's hands. Now, do you believe that the FBI or the federal agencies, the OPR investigators are not trained internal affairs investigators? It's two different types of, you investigate criminals, that's one thing, but to investigate internally takes a little bit more than just being a good agent. Do you think that there's a lack of training, a lack of commitment, a lack of true seeking? Do you think that that's lacking in OPR?
I don't know that for a fact. I don't know what training they receive in addition to their normal training. But I always got the impression that they treated cases differently depending on what they were hoping the outcome would be. So, as an example, on one of my affidavits, James Joseph Dolan was the affidavit. If anyone looks it up on the website, that's the most clear-cut example of OPR having no curiosity as to what actually happened. And the reason I say that is because the affidavit claimed I had a conversation with a police officer up in Colony Town, New York, about a fugitive. I never had a conversation with any police officer in Colony Town Police Department about that fugitive. OPR never even contacted the police officer in question to ask him if he had ever been contacted by anyone from the FBI or from Connecticut. Never took the time to even just make a phone call to confirm or to blow up the idea that someone had spoken to a police officer at that police department. And that would have been a 5-minute phone call. They never took the time to even do it because they did not want to know. The answer was no one had ever contacted him, and the whole paragraph of information was completely false.
How should law enforcement agencies handle whistleblower reports?
They have to give it priority because it is a complaint coming from a sworn law enforcement officer. Civilian complaints, I imagine, are fairly common, but less common are complaints made in-house by police officers. Even though I guess we're not supposed to have increased credibility, I always believe in my heart that we do and we should, because of our training and our experience and the fact that we took an oath of office. So I believe that that should be given priority, and that those types of complaints need to be scrutinized and thoroughly investigated and not whitewashed like I experienced.
I think the police culture discourages speaking out or encourages silence.
Oh, absolutely discourages speaking out. Your career will never be the same. And you can be 100% correct in every single thing you say, and it'll still be held against you later on in your career.
What reactions have you received from readers and the public after you came out?
Almost without exception, very supportive. I've been very, very pleased. I spoke last night at a group meeting in Westport, Connecticut, and the people could not have been more gracious. They could not have been more welcoming, and afterwards they could not have been more supportive and complimentary. I shouldn't look at my reviews of my book, but I always find it interesting that almost all the reviews are 5-star, and then you'll see like a 1-star or a 2-star in there. And obviously that's somebody that's in the book or a family member of someone that's in the book that came out on the wrong side of this issue. So I always find it kind of interesting and comical that, everybody loves it except 2 or 3 people hate it. And it's usually going to be somebody who was involved in the falsification of the affidavits or a family member.
Have policymakers or officials commented on your case or book?
Not really. I think it was too much of a hot button topic to get involved in. So I think they try to steer clear of it because it just was an ugly episode in law enforcement.
Let's talk about the writing process of a book. A lot of us are not writers. I mean, we write, but writing a book, sometimes you get squirrel thought process, where your thought process is all over the place, like a squirrel when they hide their food and then they take the last hole. How do you started this process, and did you get any help, or did you do everything on your own?
So William, what I decided to do at the outset was, like I tend to do with most things I get involved with, is do my research first. So I took out a number of books from the public library on writing nonfiction, or how to improve your writing, or proofreading, or editing, or getting published. So I try to make myself as self-educated as I could in that area. And then at the same time, I also took advantage anytime that I would see that a local author was going to be speaking. If it was a book of nonfiction, I would go. If they were speaking about how to get published, I would go. If they were talking about the writing process, I would go. I was trying to accumulate as much knowledge on my own so that when I actually sat down and began to write it, I felt at least I had a foundation to work from. I also benefited from the fact that I'm a bit of a pack rat, and I had boxes and boxes of depositions and transcripts, reports, memos, newspaper clippings. So it made the process much easier because I had a lot of documentation to refer to refresh my recollection and to make sure that my retelling of the story was accurate.
Are there any events you wish you had handled differently regarding the book writing, and looking now that you're sitting down at home, relax, what you could have done a little bit different?
Yeah, I don't really know. You can imagine that as an unpublished author and someone without a writing background, that it becomes a challenge to get published. Now, of course, I began this process about 10 years ago. Self-publishing was an option, but it was not common. Most people try to go through a traditional publishing process. Today, I imagine from what I hear from people that have released books that it's much easier now to self-publish. There's a variety of different ways of doing it. Amazon is probably the most common, but there are other ways of doing it. So it becomes less challenging to try to get published. But at the time, I didn't have that luxury, so I had to go through a more conventional process of getting published. So I guess if I had to do it today, maybe I would have handled things differently, but back then I was rather limited in my options.
And it's quite an expensive undertake to publish a book. It's not like people think that you just do it
Right.
and publish.
Right. Correct.
And there's very little money to be made from writing a book. People might believe that you're going to become rich when you write. I'm in the process of doing my book. I'm not going to give the title, but it's a very catchy title.
Okay.
And hopefully, I could get it published.
Oh, I'm sure you will. With your credentials and your background and your stories, no doubt that a publisher will pick this up.
Did any media misrepresent key facts or events when you were going through this? You have, media that works very tight with law enforcement, and they use them almost as instigators or to drop bad lines in the media to make you look bad as the whistleblower.
The disadvantage that I was up against initially was the chief state's attorney had told us in a meeting and followed up with a memorandum that we could not comment on what was taking place, that we were gagged, and told us in private that if we spoke to a reporter, we would have to resign our positions. So I had no opportunity to challenge the remarks that were being made by the chief state's attorney and the head of the FBI office, who both decided they were going to defend the agents and try to minimize and downplay and diminish our complaint. So I had no option or opportunity to tell my side of the story until the case went into federal court.
What personal values drove you to persist despite all the adversities that you face?
Well, William, I attended grammar school. It was a Catholic grammar school. I was raised a Catholic. I went to a Catholic high school, private high school. And I guess between my upbringing from my parents and also that education system, it instilled, this code of conduct that truth has value, and one has to have integrity in a moral compass. So when I was confronted with this dilemma of what to do, it wasn't the hardest decision to make, because in my heart, I knew what I needed to do and what I was supposed to do, and I did it.
In your book, you never badmouth any of the agents involved.
No.
And it was not you didn't mean to hurt them as human beings or have their names exposed out there for their children to see it, or for future employers or their wives. And I really admire that. You kept everything so professional within the book. I mean, I asked all my listeners to get a copy of the book, because it's very detailed, it's a good read, and it's important for other law enforcement offices throughout the nation to read the book. One thing is, you see the movie Serpico, and you saw what Frank went through, and then you see little excerpts of what happens to all of us in law enforcement when we do decide to step. Because there are two different types of whistleblowers. The whistleblower that blows the whistle on an organization because of mismanagement and waste, and they make a lot of money reporting that waste or the mismanagement. But when you do it in law enforcement, you're not doing it because you're going to get paid. You're putting your life at risk, your family's life at risk, because the people you're reporting carry guns, they are trained, they don't want to lose their pension, and anybody could snap, anybody could go the other way.
Sure.
So what advice would you give future whistleblowers in law enforcement so they could navigate this process without getting hurt?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was part of the motivation behind my writing the book, is whether someone is in the private sector or the public sector, it would serve as a bit of a roadmap or a guide. And I try to explain, the peril and the jeopardy that you put yourself in if you decide to take on that role. I didn't consider myself a whistleblower because I did not make my complaint public initially. I did it in-house, but eventually it did become public because of my lawsuit. But I would recommend they read the book to try to get an understanding of the dangers or the drawbacks of taking on that role. And they have to, I explain in the book, make sure you have your documentation, try to have corroborating witnesses, and be prepared to have to withstand a lot of criticism and scrutiny and ostracization because you will be shunned.
How did the chief state attorney respond when you reported your findings?
Well, initially he appeared supportive, but like I said, within a week or two, his whole demeanor changed once he realized the implications of what the complaint involved, and then he decided to side with the FBI and not with his own men.
Before you reported your findings, was there any history of similar patterns of misconduct in the office of the task force before your encounter?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I never saw anything falsified in writing. There were some instances where I felt like things could have been handled maybe differently. Like I cited with the statistics, I thought it was improper to keep claiming arrests as if we had made them when in fact we had not. They were just trying to inflate statistics and make themselves look better. I thought that was sort of a passive violation, but I drew the line once they were swearing to information before judges that I knew was false.
What consequences, if any, did the officers or agents involved in this incident face?
Minimal at best. When they say the proverbial slap on the wrist, a reporter in Connecticut had filed a Freedom of Information request with the FBI for the results of the OPR investigation. And even though it was heavily redacted, it turns out that of the 4 agents that were investigated, one received a verbal reprimand, one received a written reprimand, one received oral counseling, which I'm not even sure to this day what that meant. And the coordinator of the task force, the one who had bragged openly that if you don't have it lie, they never prosecute these things anyway, he received what was supposed to be the harshest discipline, which was originally going to be a 2-week suspension and 6 months of probation. He challenged it, had it overturned, and at the same time was promoted to a supervisory position. So the net result was the coordinator was made a supervisor with no punishment, and the other 3 agents were given the most minor discipline that you can get.
Did you ever hear from the Department of Justice an apology or any type of apology from the state attorney generals after you won your case in court? Because people have to understand that, they pay, but they never wrong. They never admit they did anything wrong.
Correct.
They because it's not coming out of their pocket.
Well, ironically, William, in Connecticut, the Attorney General's office only handles civil matters. They don't do any criminal work. They are responsible for defending state employees in any litigation or lawsuits, but they are also responsible for defending any whistleblower activity. And the Attorney General at the time was Richard Blumenthal, who's now a Connecticut State Senator. He provided Mr. Bailey with several attorneys for his legal defense, and not once did I ever hear from him or his office as to my status as a whistleblower, and not to this day.
And that's what I call the good old boys network. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how many languages you speak, whether you were in the military for a long time, whether you were a federal agent afterwards, whether you are a good investigator with a proven record, they're gonna do whatever it is to protect the image of the organization. And that's how it is. It doesn't matter.
100%.
I believe that things have to change for other whistleblowers to be encouraged, because there is corruption. I was doing a program yesterday, and I don't want to sidetrack the interview, but we were talking about narcotic trafficking. And I simple. I said, you cannot have narcotic trafficking at a large scale without governments being involved. There is no other way for you to move those tons and tons of merchandise from one country to another without governments being involved.
Yes. Yeah. Well, William, how long did it take Frank Serpico to be acknowledged for his role as a whistleblower?
Well, it was until Major Adams gave him his overdue medal, and they had a ceremony. When they promoted Frank Serpico to detective, they gave him his detective shield in the hospital bed when he was shot in the face. The investigation of the shooting of Frank Serpico in Williamsburg, in the south side of Williamsburg, never got a full investigation. It was just, they went through the steps. But over the years, if you look at if you were to take all of the whistleblowers and put them in a room, their lives are decimated in many ways. A lot of us go through divorces, a lot of us go bankrupt, a lot of us lose so much, because even if we have small children, we don't spend the time with them. Life becomes defending the truth, defending yourself, or reporting.
It becomes a full-time job.
It becomes a full-time job. And not only that when you blow the whistle, you lose a part of your identity, and you get into identity crisis. Because a lot of the whistleblowers, the first thing they do is they take their shield, their gun, they put them in the rubber gun squad, they get suspended. They do all of these things. They get brought up on charges, bogus charges, and let him fight in the trial room, and you beat them, and then they still don't promote you, and they send you to another location where you don't want to be. So out of sight, out of mind, and we are in charge. That has been my experience with the NYPD. Meaning, I don't know if it's the same in the FBI, but I think all of the organizations are the same.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my experience was I was a supervisor of the fugitive squad. They disbanded the fugitive squad. When I won my lawsuit, I was down the supervisor of a gang unit. We did street gangs and outlaw motorcycle gangs. Within a year, they disbanded that. And my new assignment was supervisor of the elder abuse unit. So I had 25 years of experience in working violent crime, and now I was in charge of an elder abuse unit.
Do you know whether the systematic reforms were enacted due to the landmark court decision on your case?
I'm not aware of any changes that were made. I mean, they did a newspaper article saying that they were going to tighten up the review process for affidavits to make sure that they were legally sound affidavits. I have to assume they did. I have no, proof that they did, but I do remember a newspaper article coming out where the FBI claimed they were going to tighten the controls over the review of federal warrants.
How did this journey change you as a person? I mean, we're getting older.
Yeah.
I'm 62. I'm going to be 63. We're getting older.
Yeah.
And law enforcement, like I say, is for young people.
Yes.
Times of chasing people around are done. But how did it change you as a human being, as a person?
Unfortunately, I think I was maybe a bit of an idealist, an optimist, and it made me more cynical. It made me more skeptical, less trusting, because I saw how low people would go to protect themselves and to try to disparage, me. And so I came out of it a little jaded and a little more cynical than I went into it. Let me put it that way.
How important is documentation in whistleblowing cases?
It's key. And documentation can be, audio recording. It could be, paperwork, your own personal notes. I mean, fortunately for me, once I saw what was taking place, I began to take notes on every conversation that I thought might be important. And later on, oftentimes it did. And that's one of the things that I did mention in my book, is that you need to document, and corroborate. People that you think maybe can support you get called to the witness stand or get deposed, and all of a sudden, I don't remember, I don't recall, I'm not sure, I can't say. It's very disappointing. My memory was quite clear on a lot of these conversations, and people that, because they were prosecutors that I expected would testify truthfully under oath, all of a sudden became amnesic. Their memories became flawed, and there wasn't a lot of time that had gone by, but they just wanted the easy out of saying, I don't really remember, I can't be sure, maybe not, I don't know. And then you lose confidence in people. So you need your documentation to be able to support your position.
We have, as a country, the best justice system in the world, where, a jury of your peers is the ones that make the decision whether you're found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and then they'll sentence you or let you go free. But on civil cases, it's a different type of measurement, which is under the preponderance of the evidence.
Fortunately, that's the case, yes.
Right. Can you explain to the viewers a little bit about navigating that?
Well, like I said, it's a good thing that it's only a preponderance of the evidence, and not the level of a criminal case. The onus is on you to prove your allegations. And that's why the documentation and the corroboration becomes key. You have to convince, hopefully, an impartial group of strangers that you're telling the truth, and you have the evidence to support that. And the other side is going to obviously come in and try to diminish, your testimony and question your credibility. Fortunately, the jury gets to decide ultimately who's telling the truth and who's not.
What are you doing with yourself nowadays? Are you writing another book? Are you just retiring, enjoying your retirement, or are you teaching?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
William, I'm going to be 69 next month. I enjoy getting up and playing pickleball in the morning most days. Other days I'll go to the gym. I enjoy reading good nonfiction books, oftentimes about criminal justice, law enforcement, cold cases, military history, that type of thing. Socializing with friends and getting out into nature and walking, enjoying the woods in the areas of New England. And that's it. I didn't have my editor had encouraged me to come up with a follow-up book. And I just didn't have the passion or the drive to do it. I really wanted to get my story out. I felt it was an important story to tell. I wanted it to be told accurately. I wanted it to be told in a way that the reader can understand what a whistleblower goes through. And then I felt like that was it for me. I was satisfied with the way it came out. I was very pleased with the feedback, and I felt like, you know what, leave it the way it is, and just move along and go do something else.
Are there any organizations that you recommend that whistleblowers could turn to in the event that they need support?
There is I didn't discover it until much later, but I mean, there's a whistleblowers network that's online. I don't know what services or support they offer, but I know they exist. I know they're always involved with Senator Charles Grassley. He's a big part of it. And if somebody isn't, a position where they feel they're going to become a whistleblower, then I would encourage them to explore that to see what resources are available to them. Maybe there is some sort of support group or someone who can give them some guidance on a level that they need.
Yeah, I also I have worked for many years with the National Police Defense Foundation. The former agent Joseph Occhipinti, he was tried, convicted, and he got a presidential pardon. And for many years, that organization has helped law enforcement officers that are charged or thrown out of their job or lose their pensions without any merit, because either they blew the whistle or their supervisors didn't like him or whatever. And I encourage other law enforcement officers to look into the National Police Defense Foundation.
Okay.
Great organization. They have also, I think if a police officer gets shot anywhere, they offer $10,000 for information. And they have many programs. Recently, I had another whistleblower, a former U.S. Marshal, Mr. Robert Ledergar.
Oh yes, I'm friends with him on LinkedIn.
Right, and Rob, was a guest in my program, and I have a couple of other whistleblowers that are going to be interviewed in the different agencies. And I think that it is important for people to know the tremendous price that we as whistleblowers pay, including our family, our safety. And I like to take this time to thank you from the bottom of my heart for accepting my invitation. It's been an honor to call you a brother, to have you here, and you could call me at any time. I will always be here for you.
I appreciate that, William. Thank you very, very much. And thank you for inviting me onto your podcast.
Thank you. We want to express our deepest gratitude to our special guest, Mr. Greg Dillon, for sharing his courageous story and invaluable insights with us today an equalizer. Special thanks go out to our dedicated team whose hard work and professionalism made this episode possible. To our amazing audience, thank you for joining us and for your continued support. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Instagram, and tune in to my live radio program conducted in Spanish every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, thank you and God bless.